Thank you, Friso, Teresa, and Gabriel. Uh, First of all, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Eduardo Ferreira de Sousa. I'm the fifth generation of coffee producers in my family, and I'm the founder and the managing partner of Flora. But before saying anything else, I would like to say that it's an honor to be part of this webinar. And mainly, I would like to thank Friso, Michiel, all the Coffee Quest team from Brazil and from Europe for supporting and believing in the project since the day one. Shout out to Redmar and Badeta team and everybody who is part of this dream since the bottom line as well. I will share my screen and start the presentation. Let me know if you have any doubts or if I can start it. So first of all, what is Flora and what we do? What do we do? Let me start. Yeah. So Flora is a early stage company, a company that is 1 year old and is part of a dream that started in Pedra Preta. So most of you might know me from Pedra Preta, but I'm here today to share with you all that our regenerative project has developed, and that's why Flora was born. We started the company with a very challenging mission, which is regenerate the planet by producing specialty coffees and scaling regenerative agroforestry coffee systems. The words here are very important, and that's why we choose the specialty coffee as the tool to regenerate the planet. And the scale, it's also a very important thing in the whole project because the idea is to create and enlarge the positive impact. So when we talk about scaling this impact is also a very important output from the whole project. So starting this introduction, I would also like to say that Flora is definitely part of this quest and part of this Brazilian quest. And I'm very glad to count on you and start this project and start with all of you. But first things first, right? And what I want to start freshly is saying that the future of coffee, unfortunately, is not a fairy tale. As you all might know, the context of producing coffee right now, it's very challenging, mainly because of the climate change and how this phenomenon affects the whole coffee belt. So when we talk about this context, about the climate change, the very first thing that I would like to stress is that the climate change is not only the global warming or it's not about getting hotter, but it's about cultivating very brittle culture like coffee in a condition that is very extreme. So as you might know, we have cold snaps and frost a few years ago in Brazil, and all the main producers countries are also affected by this new context, by this new climate. So if we cannot change individually the climate of the whole world, what we can do is definitely change the way that the coffee is cultivated. And but before changing it, we must understand what we want to change and how we can create a new paradox to produce coffee in this new condition. And mainly coffee, at least in Brazil, is produced based on monoculture system that are very good to produce yield, to create volume, but it's also very good to consume natural resources. And when we are based on this way to produce, we have at least those four outputs. And what we can see is that when we are talking about a new context, a new climate to cultivate coffee, but we keep producing the coffee in the same way, the old way, based on this traditional monoculture system, we not only have these outputs, the biodiversity decrease, the soil degradation, the carbon emission, and the water decrease, but mainly what we can see is that this system is completely vulnerable to climate change. And besides that, this way to produce create the consequence that contribute to the global warming. So by saying that and understanding this correlation between climate and the way that we produce, we can see that it creates a vicious cycle where the traditional coffee cultivation system is devastated by the climate change, but at the same time, it intensifies this phenomenon. So that is exactly where Flora wants to address and where Flora wants to transform coffee cultivation. And how we want to do that through what we call the regenerative revolution. But one could ask me, what is a regenerative revolution? What is a regenerative approach for coffee cultivation? For us, a regenerative production system is mainly a system that produces in partnership with nature. And what does it mean? It means that we combine different outputs, different actions to create a resilient way to produce that also mitigates the climate change. And how we are doing that? We are combining four main pillars, which is, first of all, the landscape, the agroforestry systems, the soil and biodiversity regeneration, which is the regenerative practice, and last but not least, the community that makes everything happen. So going through each of the concepts, I would like to start talking a bit about the landscape recovery. This is the holistic way to understand that a farm is part of a biome, is a part of a microregion, and saying that and considering that, we must understand that there are ecological cycles within the farm. And through this pillar, what we want to create, it's a harmonic combination or a harmonic interaction between the coffee fields and the areas that are not produced, the areas that we need to protect and restore. By saying that, we work with those different actions to create this harmonic combination correlation with the production areas and reserves, for instance. And secondly, we have the agroforestry system. For us, agroforestry is all about create the ideal microclimate for the coffee plants. So we are step by step using more what we call service species, which are species that are planted with the coffee to protect coffee from the different conditions. Again, when we started the talk, I highlight that the climate change is not about uh, cultivating coffee in a hotter condition, but it's cultivating coffee in a very extreme condition. That one year could be a very cold condition or a hot condition. We need to manage the draw, the several storms, and that's why we need to create the plasticity. That's why we have different layers and different species that protect coffee from all the hazards that climate can present. Uh, Going further to the concepts, we have the regenerative agriculture practice. So first of all, the landscape connectivity or the landscape restore, it's the holistic way to see the whole farm. The agroforestry is the way to see the areas that we are producing coffee, and the regenerative practice are the process, the techniques that we use to buffer all these schemes and to create more resilience and this positive interaction with nature. That's why we work with soil covered species, biological controls, and we are focused on producing while we regenerate the soil. So that is the three main pillars that we are combining to achieve this regenerative system that we want to perform and create for coffee. But after talking and giving some examples of the pillars and the concepts that we are using to create this regenerative system, I want to highlight and I want to give you examples, not in theory, but into praxis. And that's why I want to give and bring Fazenda Pedra Preta to this talk. So, introducing Fazenda Pedra Preta to you all. Fazenda Pedra Preta is a farm located in Mantiqueira de Minas. Flora begins at Fazenda Pedra Preta, and our ultimate goal at this farm is to become the first large-scale and regenerative coffee farm in the country by playing the role of a model farm and expanding all the tests and outputs that we create through this project here at the farm. So, talking a bit more about the numbers behind Fazenda Pedra Preta, as I told you, Fazenda Pedra Preta is located in Serra da Mantiqueira, in Minas Gerais. We have a total area of 271 hectares, and currently we cultivate 100 hectares of coffee. This is a nice picture from the farm, and I like to show that to see how the farm it has a heritage or has a powerful connection between the coffee areas and the protective or the native forestry that we have within, but also surrounding the whole farm. And that is a very important part of the whole project, how we can create this correlation and how we can expand the outputs of that. And here it's a very first example or a very first map on how we want to transform the whole farm in the next years and how we want to apply this combination of agroforestry system like those orange areas and those green, dark green areas, which are the very first areas that we want to transform or convert into agroforestry. Um, and this is the outcome of the farm in the next 3 years. But besides that, there is this very important thing of creating this interaction of the native areas and the agroforestry areas. That's why we are restoring the areas that are close to the creek, the riparian areas, but also the non cultivated areas and some areas that are very important for the whole ecological cycles that we have within the whole farm. So one concept for each. So let's start talking a bit more about the landscape recovery that we are doing and how we are performing this concept into Fazenda Pedra Preta. The whole project started by understanding what we have and how is the farm and how all the aspects that we have within the farm are combined. So here I brought two maps that we happily are working with Wageningen University to help us out with this with information and data and bringing the knowledge that we need to perform this whole project within Fazenda Pedra Preta. So I want to highlight, first of all, this map where you can see all the different elevations or all the different altitudes that we have within the farm and how sloppy is the different areas of the farm. This is very important because that shows that we need to create specific solutions for each part of the farm. And that also show us how Fazenda Pedra Preta can be an example of regenerative coffee cultivation for all the Brazilian coffee sector. Uh, going further with this topic and of understanding the farm and how we want to address the different aspects of the farm. This map shows how sloppy are the farm and how we have the different conditions within the whole area. And this is a map that I like very much because it's the NDVI, which shows how we are protecting the soil. I told you a while ago that the regenerative practices are based on regenerative the soil and the biodiversity. So as you can see, those green or blue areas are the mainly the areas that we are producing the coffee, and that shows how we are step by step increasing the protection and increasing the regeneration of the soil in all the areas that we are already producing coffee. This is an area that we want to go further, and we will also bring the agroforestry coffee, the alley agroforestry coffee, to extend this impact to the whole farm. Here is a summary or a map that you can see how we are combining all those different actions that we have within the whole project. So these light green areas are the areas that we understood that we cannot produce coffee. But besides that, because mainly they are not for the nutrients or the how fertile is the area. It doesn't allow us to produce coffee, or because of the how physically is the soil. And that's why we understand that most of the areas that we cannot produce coffee are, in the other hand, areas that we need to protect. And we need to reforestate to protect all the areas that are very important for coffee cultivation, or for the whole farm. That's why we are reforestating all these green or this light green areas. And we are also combining these reforested areas with the eco pathways that are very important for the whole project, because it creates a positive interaction of the fauna and the flora, and are corridors where the fauna of the whole farm can spread and can be part of the whole farm, and bringing insects, natural predators that are very important to control pests and disease of the coffee, sorry, as well. Those dark green areas are the riparian forestry that we are reforestating to protect the creek. So as you can see, the creek played the role of a spine of the whole farm. So that's why we are connecting all the coffee plots through this spine, through the creek, so we can increase, we can boost this holistic way to connect the coffee plots with the protected or the native forestry areas. So going further, we finally get through the agroforestry discussion and the agroforestry debate. And I want to start this discussion showing you the two main designs that we are currently working at Fazenda Pedra Preta. The very first one, which is called Mantiqueira de Minas, or the Mantiqueira Agroforestry System, it's the blueprint that we created for the sloppy areas that we have at the farm. So here we are combining different native species like Guapuruvu, Jequitibá, Ingá, and Ipê Roxo. Each of these species are very important to create ecological service for the coffee. So for instance, Guapuruvu and Ingá are leguminous trees that can fix nitrogen in the soil and can create a very important and good organic manure after pruning it and mowing that for the coffee. So by combining Guapuruvu and Ingá with Ipê Roxo and Jequitibá, what we want to have here is flowers all over the year. That is very important to attract the natural predators, which plays a very important role for decreasing the pest and disease outbreaks that we have in the coffee cultivation. I want to highlight in this topic the importance of using the inga in the system. The inga have a nectarian that produce food for insects the whole year. That attracts different wasps that can eat most of the pests that we have in the coffee cultivation. That is very important because by using this knowledge and combining those different species, we can boost the ecological service, and we can decrease the necessity of chemical control that normally we use in the traditional coffee cultivation systems. But what is the difference between the Mantiqueira system and the Ale agroforestry system? As I told you, the Mantiqueira agroforestry system was created for the sloppy areas, the manual areas where we cannot harvest the coffee with the harvesting machine. That's why we have trees in almost all the coffee rows. And by using that, we can expand the outputs that we want to create for each of the Mantiqueira agroforestry systems that we are created within the farm. But in the other hand, we also have the Ale agroforestry system, which is based on an American concept, which is the Ale agroforestry system. And this technique or this concept is mainly based on creating biodiversity goals, as this one that you can see in this image, which for us it's a combination of the Inga and Guapuruvu, which play this role of the service species. But we are also working with the macadamia, which is a very interesting cash crop that have very positive interactions with coffee. And that's why we are combining here the macadamia, the guapurufu, and the ingá, and we are surrounding the coffee rows with these biodiversity rows. So by doing that, we create the windbreakers. We can bring the natural predators within the coffee area, and we can create natural sheds for these insects that are eating and combating the pests that are destroying the coffee cultivation in Brazil, but in the whole coffee belt, I would say. So we are combining those two blueprints, and we are sharpening each of them for specific areas of the farm, as I show you in the maps. So we can get the most of each concept, and we can get the most of each area of the farm. So I would like to show you some pictures, so then you can have a better look of the farm and how we are combining the eco pathways like this one. As you can see, we have the creek passing through this eco pathway, and here we have an agroforestry system that is not only shaded by the Guapuruvu already, but it's also creating layers of biodiversity through all the whole farm. That is very important for the corridors that the fauna can pass through the coffee plots and get through the native areas that we have all along the whole farm. So here we have an example of the Mantiqueira agroforestry system, and here just above we have the very first plot of the Ale agroforestry system that we planted last year. And here you can have a zoom out where you can see the guapuruvus growing up and already giving some shade for the coffee system or the coffee trees. And I like this picture very much because first of all, it can shows this connection of the native areas and the corridors with the areas that we are producing coffee. And I want to highlight that this area is 1 year old. So you can see how the Guapuruvu are very effective on growing. So Guapuruvu is considering the fastest growing species in all the different biomes that we have in Brazil. And by doing that, we can sequestrate a lot of CO2, but in the other hand, we can fix a lot of nitrogen in the soil, so we can create different outputs, different good outputs for the coffee. Here, one could say that it's only an intercropping of Guapuruvu and coffee. But again, as I said, this is a 1 year old coffee plot or agroforestry coffee plot. So you can see like the ipe growing over here, the jequitibá growing over there. Because when we are talking about agroforestry, it's very important to understand that each of these species must fulfill a specific layer above the ground, but also below the ground. So we cannot or we don't create any kind of negative interaction between the different species that we are cultivating. So we don't want to create competition. We want to create positive interactions between all these different species. Here, it's a picture of that plot that I was talking before. Here it's the alley agroforestry plot that we planted last year. We currently have 15 hectares of the alley agroforestry system and around 10 hectares of the Mantiqueira agroforestry system. Here it's a good picture because you can see the biodiversity row that cross all the coffee plots, while in between you can see the coffee plots, so surrounded by the biodiversity rows, but also surrounded by the native forestry that we are boosting all over the Fazenda Pedra Preta. Sorry. And here I like very much of this picture because it's a picture that I took some months ago during our winter, and you can see how we are managing to have our soil full covered throughout the winter, throughout the drought. That is very important because, as you might know, when the sunlight affects directly the land or the soil, we lose different nutrients that we normally have in the soil, mainly the nitrogen, which is the most important nutrient that we need for all the different species that we are cultivating, but mainly for the coffee. So it's not only about creating the agroforestry and creating this positive interaction between each of the species that we are cultivating, but how we are creating process, how we are using different regenerative techniques to boost these positive interactions. In this picture, you can see Guapuruvu which is less than 6 months old, and here is the macadamia, and they are all growing throughout the driest time of the year. That is very important for us because that shows the resilience that we are creating step by step through the regenerative practice, but also through the agroforestry system that we are creating at the farm. So last but not least, the regenerative practice that we are using at Fazenda Pedra Preta. So what is a regenerative praxis? Regenerative praxis in our concept, as we talked just a little before, are practices that allow us to produce in a specific area of the farm while we regenerative the soil and the biodiversity that is within this area. And by that, we are combining different practices to boost these interactions. So first of all, and the one that I want to give as an example are the soil covered species that we are using in the agroforestry areas, but also in the monoculture areas that we still have at the farm. This video is a very interesting video because it's a video that I took 1 year before the frost that we have in 2021. So it was just after the winter of 2022. As you can see, the whole farm was very dry, but we were combining different regenerative practices in this area. As you can see, those trunks, those leftovers, are the leftovers of the pruning that we need to do in all the coffee after we suffered with the frost. So we prune all the coffee, we stamped all the coffee trees, we put all the trunks in the middle of the coffee rows, and then we mold all the coffees with this machine that you can see just above the video. And this machine over here, it's a planting machine that was taking advantage of this green manure that we created and planting the soil covered species that we were using this year. So here, as I was saying, we were combining those two implements, those two machines. This one was mowing all the trunks and creating this green manure, and the other one was planting just after this tractor was mowing all the leftovers of the coffee. By doing that, we were expanding the life cycle of the coffee, and we were creating a new meaning for the coffee or for the leftovers of the coffee by being a nutrient, let's say, for the mix of different species that we were planting. So here you can see the result after after combining those two techniques. So here you can see the leftovers of all the coffee trunks, and just after that you can see the 5 different species that we planted through all the coffee rows. That was very important for us and was a beautiful outcome that we had. And you can see a little bit of that through this image. As you can see, we managed to cover all the soil without creating any competition between the soil covered species and the coffee. And besides that, we managed to cover all the open area that we have in between the coffee trees and the mix of soil covered species that we planted. And as some examples that I could give of outcomes or consequences that we had by combining those regenerative practices, we could decrease half of the necessity of herbicides that we normally have by protecting the soil and creating shade for all the system that decrease the herbs or the weeds that we normally have to combat. Besides that, all these different species that we planted all over the coffee rows or in between the coffee rows attract a lot of different natural predators within the coffee plots, and that allows us to forbidden or to exclude any necessity of pesticides in this area. So that's why it was very important for us because we couldn't fix nitrogen, we could decrease the necessity of herbicide, and we could decrease almost 100% the necessity of fungicides and insecticides in this whole area. And here it's a video of the tractor mowing all this green manure that we created, all these soil covered species that we had over here. So the tractor was passing through the coffee rows and mowing all these species, all these these different organic matter that we created and spreading all this compound in the coffee roast, so it could create this abundance for the coffee. And here it's a picture where you can see the zoom out and a very important, how could I say, a very important study that we did at the Fazenda Pedra Preta. Throughout this whole crop season, we had a big issue, not with the draw or with the cold snaps, but with very severe storms that we have throughout the whole year. And here we were afraid of increasing the disease, the fungi that we normally have, like the coffee leaf rust in the coffee areas. That's why we choose to mow one row and keep the other one. But at the same time, we keep the other plot full of the soil covered species, and we created a scientific study comparing the different plots so we could analyze the outcome that we had. And the outcome that we had, I can share with you all, is that even though we had a very high humidity throughout the summertime of this crop season or this whole season, we didn't have any problem with the coffee leaf rust in the areas that we that we kept the soil covered species in all the coffee rows. And here, there is a very
Eduardo,
important chart.
can I give
Sorry.
you a
Yeah,
small
please.
heads up for the last 5 minutes? So
Mhm.
afterwards we can still have some time for questions within the hour.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. So, going to the final slides, I want just to address and to highlight how we are measuring everything that we are doing at the farm. So we talk about landscape connectivity, we talked a little bit about agroforestry system and regenerative practices. And here are the KPIs that we are using and combining that we created with the Wageningen University to keep tracking and understanding the combination of all this action that we are doing throughout the farm, and how are the outputs that we are creating by using and combining all these techniques and all these pillars that I highlight to you all since the beginning of the presentation. So we created four different pillars: the soil, biodiversity, water, and the social and spiritual KPIs. So we can track and create specific methodology for each of them. That is very important for us, but because combining those KPIs and tracking this down through all the different crops, we will have a very important thing, which is our impact report that we will do annually at the Fazenda Pedra Preta. And last but not least, I really want to invite you all the roasters, all the people who are in the coffee sector, to support and come with us in this quest in the Flora movement. And how we want to invite you all. All the €1 per kilo of all the coffee that we sold will be used to, first of all, finance a sustainable project at Fazenda Pedra Preta. Secondly, to sponsor the Flora's annual impact report, and what we want to create for all the roasters that are part of this whole project. First of all, we will have full access, or we will give full access of all the data and special content of the Flora movement and all the different projects that we have within Flora. We want to give you regular updates of the sustainable project that you guys are supporting. And last but not least, all the roasters that are part of the movement will display at the annual impact report. So I hope I could give you some examples and highlight what we are doing in Flora, all the pillars that we are combining to create this regenerative agriculture system for coffee cultivation and create what we want the most, which is transform the coffee cultivation through this regenerative approach. Thank you all.
All right, amazing. Yeah, perfect. Thanks for sharing, Eduardo. I think for us at least, from the Coffee Quest perspective, we're very happy to see kind of like pioneers in agroforestry. Obviously, in the coffee sector, it's not an uncommon thing to find agroforestry, but I think in the way and the approach in terms of scalability, it's something new. I want to remind people who are listening that if you want to have a question, you can still share your questions in the Q&A. We'll read them to Eduardo, and we still answer them. We do have some questions here from the team. I also see Gabriel has one. So what I understand from the different agroforestry systems that you've planted on your or are in transition of planting on your demonstration farm, I see that there's a big difference between certain approaches, because I do see that there's still some monoculture to be found, but I also see full reforestation in certain areas. How did you decide on going about the different systems? What I remember from your visit is that you were also testing out different systems. Can you tell us a little bit about that process of testing out a system, deciding how to implement it, etc.?
Great, Frizo. I guess everything starts from the holistic approach that we want to give in Fazenda Pedra Preta. So that brings us different geographic concepts, I would say. And one very important for us is the ecological fragility that we can see in specific areas that we have at the farm. This ecological fragility is a way that nature shows us where we need to protect, first of all, and where we should produce. And that is the very first layer of deciding how we want to perform or how we want to bring the agroforestry system for each part of the farm. So those two designs that I show are the very first blueprints that we have at the farm. But we take in consideration the altitude, the type of the soil, how sloppy is the area to define and to sharp a little bit each of the designs that we have to get the most of each area, but also to create this interaction or this positive combination or correlation of the areas that we are protecting as a native forestry, as a riparian forestry with the areas that we are producing, and combining that or connecting that with the corridors or the ecological pathways that we are planting throughout the whole farm.
It's very interesting. All right, I'm getting some questions here. First from Sal, from France. He's asking two questions. First of all, what's your favorite coffee preparation? And second of all, he's asking why your coffee is low in acidity. They use it in France. It's amazing and well balanced profile.
Cool. Thank you for the question. First of all, that is a very important thing because we talk a lot about regenerative approach, agroforestry, how we are bringing the sustainability approach for the coffee cultivation for the Brazilian. And I didn't talk much about the sweetness of the coffee strong mantiqueira from Fazenda Pedra Preta, and so that is a subject that I will leave for Frizo and Gabriel to talk a little bit more to each of you. But right now, I guess I'm drinking a lot of Hario and mainly French press, I guess, because we are doing so much things that I need to be a little bit hurry up by preparing the coffee. But talking about the acidity, I guess Friso have some different lots in his hand that he can send to you, and probably you find acidity, the bright acidity from Mantiqueira in some of those lots. I already asked Friso to send you some of those samples so we
Yeah.
can get
I
your
can
commentaries
I
after
can talk
those.
more about it. What we're seeing in Brazil, especially also from is that in the area where Eduardo's harvesting, the L2s can go up to 1,300 meters, I believe.
Mhm.
So there is an option to have good acidity, but most of the acidity comes in the post-harvest processing. And what I'm also seeing is that you are investing in the post-harvest equipment
Yes.
that you have, allowing you to have better control of what you're doing. You know, better control will give you some more option to get fruity flavors, more intense acidities, and I think that's I would say like a work in process, like you mentioned, new
Mhm.
samples, more chances, and it's getting better every year for sure. I have another question from Daniel Humphreys. I believe you know him very well.
Yes.
He said, "Thank you for the presentation. That your farm left a strong impression on them in the visit in 21. He's curious about the relationship between sustainable practices and cup quality. I think especially for specialty coffee enthusiasts, that is the holy grail is to connect both such nice projects together with the improvement of cup quality. What's your like
I,
first experience with this?
I will first of all thank you, Daniel, for the question. It's great to talk to you, and I will use some debates and some discussions that I had with one of the geekiest coffee guy that I know, who is called Friesen, and we were discussing about precursors in quality and some of the already known precursors that we have in terms of quality in cup quality are mainly created by the microorganisms that we have in the areas that we are growing coffee. And when we are using regenerative systems to produce coffee, we are protecting and boosting some of those microorganisms. And those microorganisms are the ones who break the very long sugar that we have, sugar compounds that we have within the coffee cherries. And that would be a very important boost for the quality. It would be a very important way to show the terroir, in our case, the terroir of Mantiqueira de Minas. So that is a way that I see of protecting the microorganisms, boosting the microorganisms that we have within the farm through the regenerative approach that we are bringing. And that is the way that I see that is combined or will be a very important layer of quality in all the senses.
Yeah, yeah, I fully agree. I mean, what we're seeing is that the moment the cherry is picked, you basically create the first opening inside the cherry for the natural microorganisms, the yeast that are on the cherry skins and everything to enter. I would say the first step of fermentation, which is happens right away after picking. I don't think we can have full results until a few years from now. But I do think what you're saying with the precursors for post-harvest processing, I think it's a very interesting element. One of the other things we discussed with Eduardo is actually something that is the yield of the coffees.
Yes.
Um, a lot of the yield, or at least let's say the things you would filter out afterwards in the dry milling, are disformities that happen through nutrient deficiencies. So I think one
Mhm.
of the things that and you already mentioned visible is that there are small increases in yield to be found, and that's something we also heard from a Colombian study. I think so. It's very interesting to consider that as a producer, which I think across the seasons yields varies, and it's something that you're projecting your farm income on. So it is a very important step as well. So we have Ricardo. I think from Guatemala, if I'm not mistaken. He says, have you been able to measure the difference in maturation time between monoculture and agroforestry plots?
A big hug to my dear friend Ricardo. He's part of this whole project. He spent a year here at the farm. I learned most of those practice from him and from the legacy that Guatemala coffee sector has. So he's a big friend of mine, and I'm very happy that he's attending to the this talk. He knows pretty well that in the beginning we had a lot of issues with the maturation or how the coffees were ripening differently because of the shading system that was not homogeneous for all the coffee rows. So that's why we transform a bit the designs that we were using, and that's why we are, as you could see in the Mantiqueira design, that we are combining different layers of this shading system, actually different species that create different layers. So we can have this homogeneous shading system for all the coffee plots. And another very important thing is the pruning system because we don't want to have a static shading system. We need to prune it because 1 year would require us, for instance, to bring more solar energy, to bring more solar illumination, let's say, through the coffee plants. And another part of the year, for instance, we will need to cover and to have a very tough shading system. So that's why we are working more with service species than with cash crop species, because then we can prune it and give what coffee needs in the different part of the years, let's say.
All right. There's another question here from Tom Mok Mok Coffee. He says, will your coffee be organic certified in the future? And when will you join the cupping in Amsterdam?
Hey Tom, thank you for the question. That is a great question. By the way, some people ask me about this goal to become organic, and what I really want to create is a step-by-step transformation, create the resilience. Before changing everything that we do, this is a very dangerous path for all the coffee producer to become to be actually a traditional coffee grower and become a organic producer in a few years or in a very short period of time. So what we want to create is to create the resilience that the regenerative system can give us, and then step by step we are already decreasing the necessity of chemical controls and create this resilience that we need to become organic in the long term.
Yeah. So the way I understand it, it's more the result of a long road towards organic than actually certifying early on, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I see a raised hand also from digital raised hand from Gabriel. Gabriel, are you still there for your question?
Here. I'm here. Yeah. Thanks for the presentation, Eduardo. Awesome presentation. We have been seeing an increasing number of producers that are willing to develop their own agroforestry system. And
Mm-hmm.
what would you say is the first step for that?
Great question. That is very important debate that we need to address. As you know, we don't have much studies and much examples of agroforestry in Brazil, and that changes very much when we are comparing the way that we produce with other countries. By the way, like Ricardo in Guatemala, for instance, we need to, first of all, understand the biome that we are, the micro region that we are, how those ecological cycles play a very important role in the farm. Because by understanding what we have, we can address the specific areas of the farm with actually different agroforestry systems, for instance. So what I would recommend is that we need to start from the beginning. So we need to start in a small scale, understanding what we are doing, understand which species that we want to combine with coffee, and what is our ultimate goal on using agroforestry in our farm. One could use to diversify the products that he wants to produce in the farm. One to might be actually in a region that it's very dry and want to increase the water availability for the coffee plants. So there are so many different layers in these agroforestry debates and so many outputs that we can get through agroforestry. But the main advice that I could give is to understand the farm and understand your goals and starting in small scale and increasing the agroforestry step by step, as we did. You all know that we started with Ricardo in 2 hectares that we use as a lab to test and evaluated everything that we are doing. And now we have one third of the whole farm as an agroforestry. So we committed a lot of errors, we learned a lot of things, and then we start step by step increase the agroforestry areas that we have at the farm, and to become this whole agroforestry farm, which is our ultimate goal.
You are on mute, Frizo.
Thanks, Gabriel. Last question then from Virgil, who's asking in relation to the organic certification, if there is a period that can be told, like a transition period that you would say it would take to transition to organic, how long that would be approximately?
Cool. Thank you for your question. That is a important debate as well, because the very first thing that we want to evaluate it and be very sure is that we created this resilience that we are expecting to creating, combining all those different pillars that we discussed a little bit. I don't believe in the organic monoculture. I believe in the agroforestry organic production. That is the very first thing. So that's why we want to create this resilience that agroforestry will give us. We want to recycle, renovate the ecological cycles that we have in the farm, and we want to learn and scale up the regenerative practices that we are using at the farm. So step by step, we are gonna decrease all the chemical compounds that we right now use by becoming organic in a long run. I couldn't say how long it will take, but what I could say that map that you saw with 100 hectares of agroforestry, it's a goal that we have for the next 3 years. So we want to scale up all this project, and step by step we will achieve this goal of becoming more resilient, and then organic, let's see, probably.
All right, perfect. Maybe a good example would be is just to think about the length of a tree to reach maturity. And I think you are including a lot of other vegetation in your systems, and including the coffee as a shrub itself. So I think, how long does it take? It really depends on nature, your area, and obviously the intensity of your, like how rustic versus non-rustic your agroforestry system is.
Yes.
All right. Then we're going to close off. Eduardo, thanks for your presentation. The webinar is great, and thanks for preparing the slides. We're going to close it off. Last thing to mention. We're obviously working with Brazil this upcoming season. Sample availability is becoming, more wide and wide, including samples from Eduardo. We are working with Teresa and Gabriel very hard to make sure that we have samples available to share with roasters. One of the ways to help out is to follow the project of Eduardo. If you're interested in the samples, let us know. Outside of that, I think this is definitely a project that we should follow up on, and we'll continue in the next couple of years. If you don't mind, we're gonna share obviously the recording of this online as well, which can be found on our website, but also on our socials. And with that, we can close it off. So thank you very much for your time, Eduardo, and others, and everybody who's listening and participating. All right.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate
Everyone.
it.
Bye-bye.